The Redemption Inquiry by Michael Diamond. Part 4. Beasts of the Apocalypse. Chapter 22. RamKat Speaks. The third incarnation of Ram Nissan Katz, a burnt-out hulk of his former self. We get the gist of it from his younger, lapsed-hasid buddy, looking back from the redemption, as to how the dead-end cyber-busker came to enjoy steady employment at said Hasid's cyberdelic dive, Cafe Soma. The former resistance leader, DJRoNK, morphs into shady nightclub performer, RamKat. Wherein the Hack Pack track him down and effect a rescue.
Ram Nissan Katz, a.k.a. RamKat, claps and rubs his gnarled hands together. Through bloodshot sclerae, he ogles the crowd. Is anybody paying attention? The dimly lit playroom is furnished with a fleet of beat-up old light tables and reclaimed lazy boy recliners. A few well-placed lava lamps deposited hither and thither hipster retro déclassé decor of the 23rd century. The number of potions, powders, and spells available to the wannabe 23rd century psychonaut is several orders of magnitude greater than what was on the streets any time in the previous 2 centuries. Alcohol, opiates, and cocaine, the old standards to gin up the frisson of hanging out at death's door, have mostly been replaced by a growing armamentarium of cyber intoxicants. That sexy old dame Thanatos. On the cellular level, the upregulation of serotonin receptors in the prefrontal cortex, thirstily looking for their dried-up substrate. The neurobiology of programmed self-deselection. Cyber-excitotoxicity. Unparalleled bursts of neuronal arrays forced to yield up their synaptic goodies, leaving the source depleted and the recipient done in. I am the Candyman. How low I had sunk. Survival makes pimps of us all. Now, at the time of the redemption, it's totally clear that AI was on the track to oversee the broadest sweep of the apoptotic boom on the macro level of human history that had ever been witnessed. Humanity headed for the big sleep. But back when it was just another way of getting high, Cafe Soma, my modest establishment, was usually a reliable gig for the RamKat. A typical night, he'd scrounge up a handful of astros, our preferred currency and transferable anywhere in the Milky Way, under the watchful eye of the latest incarnation of the dread pirate Roberts. RamKat is pretty certain that he himself is present in his physical body that night, but he isn't so sure about the rest of the cyber freaks in the cafe. He scans the joint, taking note of each of his denizens, all in varying stages of composition and decomposition, sparking and gyrating in place, virtual, actual, or otherwise. He'd once discovered that he was playing to an entire room of avatars, virtual patrons. No tips. Damn those avatars. Another victim of the detachment of the virtual. Deadpan shtick, RamKat's spécialité de la maison, warms the crowd, such as it is.
The moving walkway is about to end. Thank you for shopping planet Earth. Watch your step. Have a nice afterlife.
He attempts a grin, more of a post-mortem rictus. A raspy in-breath under his cowl, he flings out the arms of an ivory caftan, flashes a cobalt blue underbelly at the heads nodding in the static-filled room. Arms drawn to the fore, with slow deliberation, he holds the palms out toward the crowd, makes the double shin sign of the Cohen Gadol. The actor, Leonard Nimoy, a descendant of the ancient Kohanim, high priests of the temple in Jerusalem, repurposed the holy gesture for the Vulcan greeting in the 20th century sci-fi TV series Star Trek. RamKat loves the bathos wrapped up in that fun fact. He too was a descendant of the priestly lineage, Katz being a contraction of the title Kohen-Tzedek, righteous priest. The only thing righteous about RamKat these days is the rock-steady music he streams for his gigs. Deep breath, pause for effect. He croaks his command.
Let the cyborgy begin.
As 20th, 3rd century versions of 20th century techno music fill the air, beams of indigo light zap from RamKat's palms, fingertips, third eye, and crown. The gangly, hollow-eyed space cowboy shuckles and drives his way through the crowd. At once mesmerizing and ludicrous, RamKat's chicken dance is just ramping up. As he saunters past each cyber freak in the room, he lightly pokes a third eye, leaving behind a smudge of indigo light. Some coo in response, some beam, some stare blankly and drool. When RamKat makes his way back to the beamer, his floating control platform in the center of the room, he turns to the crowd and solemnly pronounces his huckster perversion of the high priest's triple blessing.
May you grift all you can, but not get caught. May you grok the vibe, but not get too hung up. And may you step all the way to the edge, but not freak out.
The cyberstoners sit entranced as a series of colored balls float from their bodies with each successive blessing. First, an indigo ball of light the size of a head of cabbage pops out of each supplicant's navel, spins round the body about 2 inches from the skin, morphing into a fat blue hula hoop, which then begins to tilt and gyre in every direction until they are coated, each one, in blue spandex spacesuits. Next, a softball of ruby light jumps about 2 feet out of their chest cavities, morphing into a medium-thickness hula hoop, and tilts and gyres until it engenders a cocoon of ruby light that surrounds each body for 2 feet in every direction, vibrating with the electronica that pulses from the beamer. Finally, a golf ball of pure white light shoots out of everybody's third eye and sails out to wherever the horizon might be if they weren't all vegetating in this static-filled cave. The golf balls, swung wide, form the evanescent hula hoop of the apocalypse, which tilts and gyres until every freak is nested in the middle of her own colossal cosmic egg. Then, with a flick of a finger, RamKat shifts the energy. The burned-out psychonauts blossom into 4D psychedelic bouquets of neon flowers. Baby faces, aging visages, cadaverous masks, fleur du mal. Each cyberstoner transfixed, watching himself bloom and grow from fetus to corpse. RamKat, past master of the massive multiplex matrix, now an avatar of MOM, the matrix of matter, all to one groovy tune, the mid-century modern's cover of Strangers in the Night, a 23rd century Cyber Days classic. The cyborg groove is infectious. RamKat is probably the only one in the room who knows the original Old Blue Eyes pressing, as they called recordings in the 20th century. Along with his Hasidic dynastic title, the 7th generation Rav inherited the colossal collection of vinyl passed down to each successive lineage holder from the founder of A Gathering, his great-great, etc., Reb Levi Katz. And this is their secret anthem. For all his ambivalence about his mishpacha, his clan, RamKat has to admit he digs every version of this tune, no matter how whacked. The crowd swirls and dervishes, a convulsing garden of floral beings, a living cyberdelic tanka, all superimposed on a pulsating 3D cobalt blue grid. With the addition of disco balls and strobe, the effect is complete, and RamKat sees that it is good. Each frozen stroboscopic moment, a vision of eternity. At the end of the gig, for only 144 astros, RamKat offers each of his fellow space cadets a holo snap of their groove in the Matrix. Not exactly collector's items, but the cyborgy virgins can't resist. He's saving the eternity feature for bigger gigs. It adds future generations and previous generations for the truly discerning cyber freak, augmenting the bouquet with swirls and paisleys of tiny faces. Total mindfuck. He worked out the glitches so the whole tree of life, as he calls his traveling medicine show, is displayed in 4 colors. A socio-biological cyberdelic application of the 4-color map theorem. Genealogy software reached its apotheosis in the 22nd century when the ability to plug in probabilistic progeny came online. RamKat has access to the best through a gathering. They haven't given up on him yet. Eat your heart out, Angel Maroney. Add in RamKat's primitive 4D bio-cyber programming skills, and presto, changeo, trio life. The holo-disco genealogical photo booth gigs are well known to the low-rent psychonaut community. A quarter of a millennium after Timothy Leary exhorted his fellow transhumanists to turn on, boot up, jack in, cyberpunk and algo raves had long since devolved into a handful of cheap thrills, enhanced by various colors and chemicals, courtesy of the latest incarnation of Sandoz cyberceuticals. Most folks wake up happy and largely unaffected by the experience, as they are similarly unaffected by their own lives. Sure, they're temporarily wowed by the coincidences of genealogy and the palette of cybertones, the loosening of poiches upon the self, but no imprint remains for long in the mind of the inveterate cyberstoner. RamKat himself has been sober lo these past 50 years. His bloodshot eyes are neither substance nor cyber-induced, but the product of decades of intractable insomnia. At 18, he'd gone off the Hasidic reservation and dived headfirst into all the psychonautical world had to offer. Ram Nissan Katz was known to his disaffected yeshiva cronies as DJRoNK, cyber DJ extraordinaire. His first venture into illegal cyberstates was a wild ride he dubbed Strange Fire. Almost snuffed himself, merging with the oneness. To the more attuned souls of the first half of the 22nd century, it was aptly apparent that AIs were in ascendance and humans were on their way down the food chain. DJRoNK and his yeshiva buckaroos observed with wary eyes the rapid construction of Leviathan in the North Atlantic. The pervasive presence of ZizCorp's drone fleet was equally ominous. As of yet, the buckaroos were unaware of the global predations of Behemoth Unlimited, since its monster machine gigs were confined to the dead zones and the autonomous indigenous regions. The rabbinic authorities did not smell anything rotten in the state of Leviathan. To be fair, the vast majority of humanity that had survived the first wave of ecological collapse at the end of the last century were not inclined to perform the sniff test. Subsistence was all. The 3 monstrous AI projects that launched the day of Ram Nissan Katz's birth were framed in no-holds-barred messianic terms. Every religious organization on the face of the beleaguered planet launches a capital campaign to reserve their own little corner of Leviathan. The second world ecological collapse occurs, as predicted, just before the end of the 22nd century. The more dark-minded of the cybercat buckaroos sees the proliferation of cyber architecture across the face of the planet for the ominous event that it is, the death of human free will. They had studied enough of the writings of the sages to recognize the shadow of apocalypse spreading its dark wings over unsuspecting humanity. This is not a new story. So, with the aid of probabilistic future-casting software, developed and refined by his forebears over 6 generations, and the imaginative use of matrix of matter, MOM, DJRoNK could create a dystopian phantasmagoria on any street corner or public square, showing the likely morbid transformation of that very spot under the pseudo-benign dominance of the AIs. Cyber-busking is all the rage in mid-22nd century, so DJRoNK gathers quite the following. He hopes to shock the zombified public out of their acquiescence to AI authority. Only he fails to predict the superior power of Zizcorp's future casting capacity. They have him cast as a burnt-out false messiah leading a doomed rebellion against the AIs. I was always a secret admirer of the Priest of the Apocalypse, one of the many sobriquets for RamKat in his early days. In that life, I also attended Yeshiva Oxford Brunoy, and had also crashed and burned out of the Hasidic world. I was more than a generation behind the notorious DJRoNK as we knew him then. One of our most famous alums. Opinions were divided. Is he good for the Jews? It was Leviathan versus DJRoNK, and Jews were flocking to Leviathan in droves. With the rapid devolution of the entire Levant into a dune-swept eastern extension of the Sahara, Jews could no longer turn their lonely eyes to our beloved Zion for reassurance of a place in the world. 2009's dreams of desalination had turned out to be a flash in the global warming pan. The comfort afforded by the view from redemption is indeed a balm for the pain of what was an unspeakable loss. I still feel an ache in the center of my chest when I get together to schmooze about old times with the Raran Hakzag, what we now call Ram Nissan, since the redemption. But back then, it wasn't at all clear whether DJRoNK was an old-style Navi or just a charlatan leading us deeper into Gehenna. I land on my feet as a cyber shopkeeper, not a very elegant or elevated pursuit, but unlikely to draw undue attention from our virtual masters. I am quietly plying my trade in one of the shadier quarters of Leviathan, when a tall, gaunt figure stoops in the doorway and calls out to me in a raspy growl, "Boy, chick." I've been mindlessly riding my Be Clean bot around the cafe, zoned out on 22nd century cybertrans, when my heart is pierced by one of his demonic red eyes. I ground out and briefly consider a cyber sweep, but I detect a familiar ironic twitch at the corner of the wraith's mouth. As he steps into the light, I let out a gasp. DJRoNK! The corners of his mouth twitch even more as he prepares to emit a low-frequency growl. "It's RamKat. Breathe, 2, 3, 4. DJRoNK died. Breathe, 6, 7, 8. The AIs." His shoulders drop ever so slightly. I nod in sympathy. 28 years of re-education in a lockup in one of the dead zones. I'd heard. Only bots for company and synth food for grub. By the time they were done with him, the firebrand cyber-busking rebel was reduced to this burnt-out cinder of a cyber-huckster standing at my threshold. I shudder, but gather my wits enough to extend my hand. "Shalom Aleichem!" A volley of rapid-fire twitches. He grunts in response. "Aleichem Shalom." So begins our on-again, off-again collaboration. A couple of decades now. It was his idea to change the name of my place to Cafe Soma, something he got out of a science fiction book I suppose he'd read eons ago, when he still read books. He'd been scrounging for Astros on the street corners for some years before he stumbled into my joint. This is a steady gig. His shows at Cafe Soma are usually well attended, and he's satisfied with half the door, so it's a good relationship. if you could call it a relationship with a guy who offstage rarely utters more than 2 words in a string. I have Rahmanas for his broken neshama, pity for the pathetic lost soul. That's why when I see the 3 spoofs sitting unplugged at a table in the back, my hackles go up. I play it cool and airboard over to their table, collect the unpaid covers. Without skipping a beat, I stare at the one I take to be the head honcho. I pride myself on my ability to detect the subtle blended genomes of my patrons, maybe a side benefit of having attended upwards of several hundred of Ram's genealogical hooplas. This guy is one cool cat. East Asian, probably Chinese, on the paternal side, judging by the way he wears it. But definitely a Yid on his mama's side, making him one too. A Yinkala, or a Chewy, or a Chibru. What can I do yous folks for? Not into the show? Looking for something on the side? The leader takes off the shades and fixes me with one powerful lockjaw grin. We want to talk to DJRoNK. RamKat is thrown. We must have stood there for an eon, mulling over the relative merits of a jawfest with the intruders. Every few minutes, he casts a glance over in their direction, trying to figure out just what kind of trouble they're schlepping to his doorstep. The other patrons float out. Some smile and finger the tattooed nanochips containing the groovy holosnaps of their cyberdelic trip. Some just do the zombie shuffle. Finally, Ram's curiosity gets the better of his paranoia. The hulking wraith half ambles, half shuffles, half lopes over to the stranger's table in the back of the room. He pulls up an air stool and sits down rather abruptly, fixes a bloodshot eye on the one who seems to be doing all the talking, and belches out,
"Yo, Heeb, what can I do you for?"
There was a moment of uncomfortable silence. The chewy guy glances coolly over at his chums, then back at the big guy and says, "We figured it out. You're the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, the big kahuna. We need you, and you definitely need us." A look of genuine terror briefly flashes across RamKat's face. Then he just shuts down, rolls up the doormat, turns out the porch light, and pushes himself back from the table as he sat down. Just as quickly, Chewy shoots out an arm and grips RamKat by the wrist, firmly yet gently. I get ready to step in with my vape gun. One shot in the face and it was off to La-La Land for even the most obstreperous of guests. The guy stares straight up at the RamKat and asks with a totally straight, almost kindly face, "Cat got your tongue?" I swear, I saw a tear roll out of one corner of the old dude's eye. Never. Chewy and the other 2 geeks stand and gently point out the window to their idling air car. The other guy, not the tough-looking chick, says with a depth of sincerity I could only feel down to my retro-cool Converse All-Stars. "Look, Womo, we can offer you nothing more than your freedom, and nothing less." Later, RamKat admitted to me he just kind of found himself walking out with them, a zombie in a trance. The air car swooshes its way into the landing port at Scary, the electromagnetically and vibrationally isolated lair the Hack Pack calls home. They usher him into the lab and sit the poor bastard down in a super plush lazy boy recliner, a reproduction of the 21st century luxury original. The chick explains that they have to strap him in while they deprogram him because they can't predict how badly he'll spaz out after his inhibitions have been zapped away. He nods wordlessly as Sophie sits at the light board and plugs in the initializing sequence for the nano-LEDs that inhabit the far reaches of RamKat's neurocorporeal self. She explains, "It's really very simple. We link up with the LEDs and crank the voltage high enough to fry the little boogers." She smiles, sweetly, as she double-checks the last few coordinates. Don't worry. It's a simple trash disposal problem. You've got a whole army of your own little macrophages, microglia, and histiocytes that will make quick work of the smoking micro-wrecks. Better than any frickin' bee-bot could do. Actually, Soph isn't entirely sure about the last bit, the comparison to bee-bots, but she wants to boost his confidence in his return to humanity. Pink and Nod belt RamKat into the lazy boy, attach a leather strap to span his lower jaw as a bite guard, and step back. By the way, old dude, just so you know, we had to do the same thing for Mr. Simpatico over there, Nard, after the bee-bots got done debriefing him and his family. And he's right as rain, wouldn't you say? RamKat is no longer responsive, as his optogen internal governors robbed him of what little emotional expression he had managed to muster before all this excitement. Sophie doesn't mention what a horror show it was when they deprogrammed Leonardo's whole family, the affective storm after the unnatural machine-generated calm. She also knows that 28 years in re-education is by far the longest stint of anyone she'd had to deprogram yet, so all bets are off. You know we've met before. The Rav turns a robotic glass eye toward Sophia as she continues to make small talk. Yeah, it was at the cliff by the spring below Cabaret Castle. Must be 30 years ago. I thought you were old then, but look at you now. We'll get you a few more years of vigor with this baby. She pats the deprogrammer and smiles at the geezer. You were the frickin' flying squirrel of the apocalypse. The Rav starts to drool. Sophie looks to Pink for the go-ahead. He gives the nod, and she pushes the voltage indicators way above the max capacity for the nano units and holds it there for 5 minutes, long enough to fry every last one of them, then off. They stare at old dude. Pink hurriedly strides over to him to get a pulse while Soph boots up biotelemetry. All systems emphatically go, but the patient is still blotto. It seems like forever before they see the faint twitchings at the corners of the Rav's mouth. He manages to croak out, "Unbind me, please." Quickly, they remove the leather strap from his mouth and unbind him from the chair. He just rolls to his side, pulls his knees into the fetal position, and rocks in place, sobbing piteously. Sophie puts her hand on his shoulder and just holds it there until the sobs finally subside. At last, Ram Nissan Hakohen Tzedek Gadol sits up in his lazy boy recliner, looks at the 3 silenced hackers encircling him, and smiles the smile of a man who, after eons of banging his head against invisible walls, can feel the feeling of what it means to be free. Free at last. He stretches all 4 limbs and sighs from head to toe and back again. He mumbles something to himself about he who detoxifies from the poison of the world. He squints an eye at the one called Pink. So, what's the job? 3 hackers beam at old dude. Old dude is by no means out of the woods yet. Still kind of twitchy and prone to staring blankly into space. Pink rigs up a neurometrics helmet for old dude and zaps the aberrant circuits with low-voltage time to disrupt re-entrant rhythms, the stuff of obsessions that just won't leave a body be. A 20-minute session every day for 3 weeks, and the Rav gets a good deal less twitchy, sharpens up to a fine wit. He begins davening regularly, something that only Nod has read about. Ancient meditation practice, passed down from temple times. Seems to help him get more of himself on board. Meanwhile, they let him in on the scoop about the 18 downloads protocol and tell him as much about a Peron as they've been able to figure out. He just guffaws about the protocol. Interlude. The 18-sequence protocol, single-module version. 1. Invoke nested legacy programs and calendrical orientation. 2. Reboot nested programs. 3. Activate firewall for nested programs. 4. Specify information protocols permitting access to the initialized. 5. Light up return path for nested programs. 6. Error tolerance titration. 7. Retrieve dispersed associative sequences. 8. Repair corrupted software. 9. Calendrical synchronization. 10. Vibrational attunement to GPS alignment. 11. Rules for correct construction. 11b. The elimination of malware. 12. Activate specialist systems encoding values for distributed use. 13. Blueprint for actual physical plant. 14. Power-up receptor for a Peron. 15. Transduction sequence for a Peron signal. 16. Total resonance with nested programs. 17. Echo resonance and boost gain. 18. Smoothing function permitting sustained resonance without chaotic attenuation. Note: 4D interpolations for parallel processing of 10 or more modules. 2A. High-voltage messengers induce triple-layer firewall. B. Quadruple-faceted Ezekiel segue subroutines facilitate omnipresence of four-letter code. C. Download and empowerment of the four-letter code in perpetuity. And then 17A. System is resourced in perpetual loop and password protected against misuse. 17B. Information is universalized and proofed from corruption. 17C. Omniscience is universalized and integrated with smoothing function. Note: steps 4 through 15 are replaced by the single sabbatical invocation sequence when the system has achieved silent inertial frame alignment with entropy-driven superordinate support. Expanded 4D interpolations for extra sabbatical sequence. 2A. Universal language crown activation. B. High voltage messengers induce triple layer firewall. C. Quadruple faceted Ezekiel segue subroutines facilitate omnipresence of four-letter code. D. Total network synchronization. E. Apotheosis. F. Download and empowerment of the four-letter code in perpetuity. From Saperstein A. Notes for the Mashiach module. End of interlude.
Don't you guys get it? That's what I'm doing 3 times a day. The davening is what our people have done for thousands of years to keep our shit together, to tune in to the cosmos and to the whole biosphere.
Nard blinks at him. Really? That's it? According to what I've read, you should be using talus and tefillin, prayer shawl, and phylacteries, no? With a rueful shrug, old dude replies,
That really kills my buzz. I wish. No idea what those damn bots did with my stuff.
No worries, old dude. I researched the hell out of the gear, so we could make some and be ready to deploy them in the protocol as soon as the teacher appears. And here you are. He grins and gestures at his teammates. I've made enough for a whole minyan. Nard proudly and deliberately pronounces his mangled version of the word for a prayer quorum, the necessary 10 required for the davening to be in full force. This time the Rav just shakes his head and grins. Ram Nissan smiles a tight-lipped smile to himself, a stare returning to his face once more as he examines the tefillin Nard handed to him. The others are concerned there's a problem.
They're words, he mutters, to no one in particular. Words on parchment. They have to be written just so and inserted into these things you're calling tefillin, 'cause they ain't tefillin till we be filling them with words. Without the scrolls, it's just a pretty box with straps.
Nard is crestfallen.
Don't look so sad, young dude. Procure me some parchment, a pen, and the right formula of ink, and I'll make us a set of those little scrolls before you can say, "Hi, me's your uncle."
Nard is all over it, happy to have another antiquarian obsession to pursue. But first, Ram Nissan clears his throat to draw attention from the three hackers.
Hold on, El Nardo. So what about this swimmer guy? The one Pink thinks is some kind of AI Mashiach. How are we supposed to bring him on board with your little project? And what do you know about this Cadman dude? And how do you know that Zizcorp isn't already hip to the whole thing?
Pink turns to Sophie. You want to tell him, or should I? Sophie hems and haws. This is a restricted topic, need-to-know basis, and it's frickin' weird. Only Pink and Nard and Sophie are privy to the fact that Pink's family lore makes it clear that he channels Elijah the prophet, for real. He was actually told it was so by his father's Taoist master. The Sifu didn't have a drop of Jewish blood in him. The dude was uncanny. He knew things. People would sneak off to consult him with their metaphysical questions rather than the rabbis. So when he came up with this wild-ass identification, even the Sifu himself was surprised. But baby Pink knew things. Things about the life of Elijah that no 23rd century secular Israeli half-breed had any right to know. Things about the school of prophecy and about the ancient temple. Ram Nissan's eyes widen as he hears the details.
No shit. That's perfect. So all you gotta do is call up the swimmer dude and we're golden. No?
Pink smiles sheepishly and hangs his head. You would think so, of course. But of the 99 things I figured out, calling Moshiach isn't one. Kind of embarrassing. We hoped you'd have a suggestion. Mutters the Rav. Ram Nissan closes his eyes and mumbles incoherently to himself, rocking back and forth in his chair. The other three wait for the Rav to awaken from yet another protracted autistic trance. Maybe the deprogrammer hadn't zapped a few stray nano-LEDs. Then he begins in a slow, deliberate, and barely audible voice.
Then he will spread out his hands in their homeland, as a swimmer spreads his hands out to swim, and he will humble their pride, along with the emblems of their power. Yea, the secure fortifications of their walls he will lay low and humble, will raise to the ground, to the very dust. The electrons leap the gap between the Rav's words and the back of Pink's neck, his whole head engulfed by a halo of barely visible sparks. Nard breaks the silence. Old dude, what in blazes is that? He stares at Pink's glowing head. Ram Nissan smiles a smile from 10,000 parsecs away. Isaiah 25:11-12. I knew I'd seen this swimmer do before. I just had to kickstart the old neurons.
He looks intently at each of them.
His own unique shout-out. Pretty cool, eh?
Pink nods inside his newly acquired light helmet, jazzed by the contact high. For sure, Cadman would be hip to that one. Only how do we get the message past the terrible troika? Ram Nissan smiles again, a little more lively now.
You guys are coders, right? Well, the Hebrew language is a natural code. Every letter has a numerical value. The sum of the values of the letters in a given word is its gematria, its numerologically encoded value. If Cadman was half the Hebe he sounds like, he'd for certain have created the Moshiach AI with the ability to decrypt gematria. It's our bright boy Pink's job, as our posse's incarnation of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the frickin' prophet, messenger of messengers, to transmit the gematria of that badass passage from Isaiah. Just a repeating sequence of 20 numbers, for the 20 Hebrew words in the prophecy. That should clue him in. We'll leave it to the swimmer to do the rest.
So Ram Nissan Katz Gadol scribes the following cipher on Pink's AirPad and zips it back to Pink.
This ought to do the job.
586, 330, 310, 521, 590, 318, 744, 431, 416, 110, 609, 30, 338, 345, 484, 313, 415, 88, 311, 424, and repeat ad infinitum. Phineas Hahn, 22nd century avatar of the prophet Elijah, scrutinizes the Rav's message. Cool retro font. Pink's AirPad catches the buzz from his bioelectric flow, takes his telepathic encryption in an instant, and seeks a path in the matrix of matter. Within milliseconds of Pink's transmission, the swimmer appears.